The moment Jake Paul sat there, jaw swollen, words slurred, and pain barely masked by bravado, the entire illusion surrounding his boxing journey began to fracture. Not shatter instantly, not explode into chaos, but crack slowly. The way something does when reality finally presses hard enough to be felt. This was no longer about promotion, trolling critics, or proving doubters wrong on social media. This was about consequence, about damage, about a man who had built a career on audacity, now confronting the cost of standing in front of genuine heavyweight power. For years, Jake Paul had existed in a strange, in-between space. Too famous to be ignored, too unconventional to be embraced, too profitable to be dismissed. He wasn't supposed to be here, and yet he kept showing up, fight after fight, growing more serious, more committed, more willing to test the edges of what people thought he could survive. Critics mocked his opposition, questioned his legitimacy, and accused the entire enterprise of being spectacle disguised as sport. Supporters pointed to his discipline, his improvement, and his willingness to step into the ring at all. Somewhere between those two camps, Paul continued forward, louder than ever. Then came Anthony Joshua. From the moment the fight was announced, the tone shifted. This wasn't another crossover bout. This wasn't a retired MMA fighter or an aging former champion well past his prime. This was a former unified heavyweight world champion, an Olympic gold medalist, a man whose entire adult life had been built around delivering concussive force to other elite heavyweights. The size difference wasn't just physical, it was experiential. Joshua had lived under pressure that Paul could only imagine. Championship rounds, title defenses, stadium crowds, losses and comebacks on the world stage. Even Eddie Hearn said it out loud before the fight. This could end Jake Paul's career. At the time, it sounded dramatic, almost promotional. In hindsight, it feels prophetic. Fight night in Miami carried an unease that couldn't be manufactured. The crowd buzzed, cameras rolled, and Paul walked to the ring with the same confidence he always projected. But once the bell rang, something else emerged.
Without
Caution,
making a big
respect,
show of it.
survival.
Fighters
Paul didn't
across
charge
divisions,
forward. He moved,
across weight
circled,
classes,
clinched, tried to buy time wherever he could. Joshua stalked patiently, cutting the ring, measuring distance, not rushing, not panicking. Heavyweights don't need many chances. They need one. For a few rounds, Paul did better than many expected. He survived. He even won moments. One judge reportedly gave him 2 rounds. That detail would later become fuel for conspiracy theories. But in real time, it simply showed that he wasn't immediately overwhelmed. He felt Joshua's power early, though you could see it in his reactions, in the way exchanges ended quickly, in the urgency to tie up whenever Joshua stepped into range. Sparring big men, Paul later admitted, was different. The gloves felt heavier. The pressure felt constant. The margin for error felt non-existent. Then the 6th round arrived, and with it, reality. Joshua closed the distance and unleashed a right hand that didn't just land, it detonated. Paul collapsed instantly, his body giving out before his mind could process what had happened. The referee waved it off without hesitation. There was no controversy, no count to argue. The fight was over, and the aftermath was immediate and alarming. Paul didn't spring back up. He didn't protest. He didn't play to the cameras. He lay there, broken in a way no amount of bravado could disguise. The diagnosis came quickly. A double broken jaw, 2 fractures, titanium plates, screws teeth removed, emergency surgery. This wasn't a routine knockout. This was trauma. When Paul spoke afterward, his words were halting, his face visibly distorted by swelling. He described the pain bluntly. 4 titanium plates, 8 screws, a liquid diet. He tried to keep his tone light, even joked at times, but the gravity was impossible to miss. This wasn't content. This was recovery. This was the body demanding payment. Almost immediately, reports began circulating that Jake Paul was considering retirement. Not as a promotional stunt, not as a tease. As a genuine option, sources close to him described exhaustion, not just physical but mental. Years of training, pressure, scrutiny, and now the most violent punishment of his career delivered by one of the hardest punchers in the sport. The words "I am retiring from boxing" floated through clips and conversations, fueling speculation that this wasn't just post-fight emotion, but something deeper. Promoters and insiders didn't laugh it off. Eddie Hearn's tone after the fight was noticeably different. There was no gloating, no, I told you so. Instead, there was concern. He spoke about the reality of jaw injuries, how difficult they are to recover from, how much time they steal from a fighter's development. Healing isn't just about bone knitting back together. It's about time away from sparring, lost rhythm, diminished confidence, and the psychological weight that comes with fearing re-injury every time a punch lands near your face. For a fighter still trying to establish himself at the elite level,
all different camps
those setbacks can be career-altering. Hearn acknowledged Paul's toughness. He gave him credit for stepping into the ring with someone many professionals would refuse to fight under those circumstances. But he also made it clear that boxing doesn't care who you are outside the ropes. It doesn't care about followers, fame, or bank accounts. When you stand in front of a heavyweight like Joshua, the rules are brutally simple. Protect yourself, or pay the price. Joe Rogan's reaction carried
really
even more weight.
Reminding
Rogan
us all
has seen
that life
everything.
hangs by a
He's
thread,
watched
and
careers
that
end in
celebrity
seconds and lives unravel over decades. When he spoke about Paul's knockout, his concern wasn't theatrical. It was clinical. He described the punch as the equivalent of 10 shots compressed into one impact. He talked about the brain slamming against the skull, about damage that doesn't show up on scans but accumulates silently. He warned about chronic traumatic encephalopathy, mood disorders, memory loss, the long-term consequences fighters often face long after the applause fades. His message wasn't that Paul lacked courage. It was the opposite. He acknowledged the bravery it took to sign the contract, to step into that ring, to endure what he endured. But Rogan questioned whether courage alone justifies continuing. When someone has other avenues for success, other ways to build a life without absorbing repeated head trauma, the calculus changes. In Rogan's view, this wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about protecting what can't be replaced. As always, with Jake Paul, controversy followed close behind. Old accusations resurfaced. Claims of performance-enhancing drug use intensified. Critics pointed to physical changes, faster recovery, visible aging, acne, hairline shifts. Paul pushed back, sometimes provocatively, even suggesting at one point that he might consider taking steroids just to prove a point about what enhancement actually looks like. To some, it sounded reckless. To others, it sounded like classic Paul, stirring chaos to maintain control of the narrative. Regardless, the claims remained unverified, and the scrutiny only added another layer to an already turbulent moment. Amid all the noise, one thing became clear. Whatever people believed about Jake Paul before the Joshua fight, they could no longer deny the reality of what happened in that ring. This wasn't scripted. It wasn't fixed. No one agrees to have their jaw broken in 2 places, undergo surgery, lose teeth, and spend weeks recovering just to sell a story. Eddie Hearn shut down those theories bluntly. The fight was sanctioned, regulated, watched by officials in betting markets worldwide. The injury itself was proof. Anthony Joshua handled the aftermath with restraint. He praised Paul's toughness, acknowledged his movement and survival, and showed respect. There was no attempt to diminish what Paul had done by stepping in there. From Joshua's perspective, the job was complete. He fought, he landed, he won. The rest wasn't his to manage, but for Jake Paul, everything had changed. The question now wasn't whether he could win another fight. It was whether he should take another punch. Whether the drive that pushed him into boxing was strong enough to justify the risks now laid bare. Whether the identity he'd built around defying expectations could survive. Accepting a limit. Some see this moment as the ultimate validation of Paul's legitimacy. He fought a real heavyweight. He paid a real price. Others see it as proof that celebrity boxing has reached a dangerous edge, where spectacle and risk collide without enough regard for long-term consequences. Both views can coexist, and that's what makes this chapter so compelling. Jake Paul didn't fake bravery. He didn't fake pain. He didn't fake the consequences. What he does next will define how this story is remembered. As a bold experiment that went too far, or as a turning point where ambition finally bowed to reality. So now the question turns outward. Did Anthony Joshua end Jake Paul's boxing career? Or did he simply force him to grow up faster than expected? Is retirement the right decision, or would walking away now leave unfinished business that lingers forever? And when fighters with options face moments like this, should courage mean continuing, or knowing when to stop? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Does legacy come from pushing past limits, or from recognizing them? If you appreciate deep, story-driven breakdowns of boxing's most controversial moments, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. In this sport, the punches fade quickly, but the questions last much longer.